Hi everyone, namaste. I'm Jill Loftus of New Astrology, and I'd like to give you 6 pieces of information that I think you really need to know about the astrology of 2023. All right, the first one is that as we begin 2023, we will have Mercury retrograde, Mars still retrograde, and Uranus still retrograde. But pretty rapidly in January, those planets will all station and go direct. Now, they won't begin to traverse new territory for a while, but when all planets are direct, things feel really fast, all right? And so be prepared for the beginning, basically the first 6 months of next year, to really feel like life is changing really rapidly. The second thing that you need to know about 2023 is that Jupiter is going to be straight up flying through the sign of Aries. Now, it was last in the sign of Aries in 2011, so you may wish to go back at your life and see what was initiated in that 12-year cycle, or what opportunities came to you, maybe, or where you went over the top or took a risk on something that really didn't pan out. Maybe you were overly optimistic, not rational. But Jupiter in Aries is a very independent Jupiter. It's a very let's get things done Jupiter. But the opportunities that are going to come to you, it's not going to retrograde back into Aries again. It's actually going to move into Taurus. All right, and so that will happen in May. And when it moves into Taurus and retrogrades back, it still won't dip back into Aries. So if you've got opportunities that come to you in the beginning of the year in the Aries area of life, you got to jump on it. The third thing that you need to know about next year is that March is the month to pay attention to. Now, it doesn't mean that a bunch of explosive things might occur in March, although they might. But there are 2 planets, 2 very slow-moving planets that are changing signs in March, and this is going to really bring some changes to everyone. The first one I'll talk about is Saturn moving out of the sign of Aquarius and moving into the sign of Pisces. Now, Saturn is not at his best in the sign of Pisces. Think about Saturn, which is structure, which is, limitation, restriction, foundation, right? Underwater in the sign of Pisces, right? In the sign that's supposed to be more about the ephemeral and the spiritual and merging, right? Saturn is not big on merging. Saturn prefers control. Saturn prefers discipline. Saturn likes the energy of Capricorn, and also really liked the energy of Aquarius. Remember, it was the ancient ruler of Aquarius. So now it's shifting into the sign of Pisces. Know where Pisces is in your chart so that you can kind of touch in with that, right? It's going to be really hard to know who's in control, what's going on. Clarity will be hard to come by. And again, this is a 30-year cycle. So the last time it was in that sign was the 1993-94 time period. So think back to that, look back at your life, what was going on, how did you have to strengthen something, how did you have to restructure your life, Saturnian types of things. Where did you have to work hard, right? Know where Pisces is in your chart. The second planetary action that happens in March is Pluto dipping into the sign of Aquarius. This is huge, all right? This hasn't happened in your lifetime, all right? It takes 248 years for Pluto to move around the zodiac, and it is now dipping its toe into Aquarius. Now, this is going to be from March to June, and it's never going to leave the 0-degree mark, right? It's going to get into Aquarius, but then it's going to retrograde back into Capricorn and stay in Capricorn from June through the end of this year into the beginning and middle of 2024, and not fully commit to Aquarius until the fall of 2024. I believe it's November. So there's 2 things to pay attention to. One, you're going to want to note what's going on in your world and the world at large during this little snapshot of what Pluto and Aquarius will mean. Because once it does get into there in 2024, it's staying until 2043, okay? This is huge. As I have mentioned so many times, I'm sure you're tired of it, but Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008. Think about what that changed when it shifted into Capricorn. Think of what happened economically, to structures, right? To all those Capricorn ruled things. Well, now we're going to get a glimpse of what Pluto, which is death, regeneration, rebirth, burn it down, start over, what it's going to do in the Aquarius area of your life, but also to Aquarian ruled things like the collective, like groups of people, right? The masses. In many ways, Pluto itself rules the masses, but Aquarius is all about the collective. And so it should be really interesting to take note of just the kind of clues. But the other thing to take note of is that Pluto is pushing all the last Capricorn lessons through the fine sieve to get it all done, right? And so if there's any residual stuff, you know, you're already seeing it with these uprisings in China and Iran and other places, that stuff is going to get more and bigger. And then the way that people will try to control other people, which is unfortunate, an unfortunate human tradition, that will shift in Aquarius, and it will be more subtle and a little more insidious, in my opinion, but we shall see. The next thing that you need to know about 2023 is that the nodes of the moon are going to be changing signs. Now, this is a 19-year cycle, all right? And so this is end of 2005, 2006. That was the last time that the nodes were in. North node is moving into Libra, or into Aries, and the South node is moving into Libra, right? And remember, they go backwards through the zodiac. So they begin at 29 and then go backwards, right? So as and this is going to take place, let me take a look. I've got it down. Hang on, I got to look it up. In July, this is when that takes place. So, quick note, be sure to hop on the website. I do have I have a little overview of this on the blog of this talk that I'm giving, but I also have a listing of the major movements of the planets and the retrogrades, the moons, all the important kind of highlights of 2023 on the blog, on the website. So do check that out for more specific dates on some of these planetary movements. But the nodes changing signs is kind of it's a vibe change, right? It's really going to bring partnerships and relationships and the negative parts of partnerships and relationships into focus. It's also going to bring up the shadow of Libra, which is that that Libra energy tends to want peace at all costs. And when you go across the sky to that Aries is going to fight. It's going to fight for peace. It's going to fight for justice. It's going to fight for what it wants. So this is also going to be a really interesting time period, and you need to know where the Aries-Libra axis is in your chart. And finally, the last thing that I think you should really need to know about next year is that Venus will retrograde. It's going to retrograde in the sign of Leo. The shadow zone extends from June 19th to October 6th. That's a pretty big swath of the year, yeah. Precise station on July 22nd at 28 degrees of Leo, and going direct on September 3rd at 12 degrees of Leo. So where's 12 to 22 Leo for you? You're going to have to rethink, redo, re-examine, right? Venus in Leo is not a wallflower, right? Venus in Leo is out there, and I think this will be a lot of talk about the divine feminine. I think this will also be very interesting because whenever Venus retrogrades, there's some very interesting financial occurrences. And so that time period is important to note. It can be a time when people are kind of delusionally optimistic about certain things financially. And so you might wish to take note of that. I, of course, am not a financial astrologer. I am not a financial advisor, but it is kind of an interesting thing to take note of. And if you see it and can take advantage of it, I think that's an important thing to know about next year. All right, well, I hope this was useful and helpful. I'm just trying to keep it to the basics. If you have any questions, drop them below. I'm so excited to hear your thoughts on next year. It's going to be a really distinctly different vibe than the last few years, partially because there's not a lot of huge outer planet difficult energy. The primary difficult energy next year is towards the end of the year when Pluto is going to be squaring the nodes as they change signs. That is something definitely to take note of. But I think it's going to be very evolutionary. I think it's really going to highlight some of these Capricornian issues that have been coming along. And there are also some really beneficial energies for next year. And so it should be a fabulous year. Fabulous. Maybe I shouldn't quite use that word. It's going to be an interesting year. Happy New Year.